My name is Monk Rowe, and I'm very pleased to have Tommy Porrello with me this afternoon. And we're many miles apart, but I'm looking forward to speaking with you. A mutual friend described you as the quintessential lead trumpet player.
Hmm, that's nice.
It is nice. I've always wanted to be a quintessential something, but it's nice that he pointed that out. I'm curious about what kind of music was going on in your household when you were young, and can you recall something that made a distinct impression on you back then?
Okay, well, yeah, in my household, my father is a musician. He was a saxophone player. His brother, my uncle, was a drummer, and my other uncle was a arranger and a piano player, and he played tuba. And yeah, and my father had the Italian feast bands where they go and they pin the money on the thing. And so I started playing with that little band when I was like 8, and I was playing drums then. And my mother thought the drums were a little bit noisy, and much to her chagrin, um, I ended up with a trumpet, which is as bad as the drums as far as she was concerned. So yeah, I had a lot of influence, family influence.
They have one of those bands here in nearby Utica. It's called the Red Band. And I find them a fascinating social thing with the men and women marching around and the stamina it must have taken for some of those events.
Yeah, uh, yeah. We would start like the feast on the day before, and we would do start at 8 in the morning. Italian bands, however, don't march in step; they just walk. They don't march in step. They just walk and play because all the marches, all of the marches, the old Italian marches, they're like little overtures. They're not just like Stars and Stripes Forever all the way through it. They're very musical, and that everybody doesn't play at once, and so it's like a little mini overture. So we used to do that 8 to 12 noon, and take a break, and then to go to across the river to New Jersey and play from 1 till like 4:30. And then at night we would do a concert from 8 till midnight, and the next day and then play for the fireworks, Italian dance numbers while they shot the fireworks, and we do the same thing the next day, and four trumpets, and we all did all of it, and I guess nobody ever told us we're supposed to get tired. We just played. It took a lot of endurance. Along those lines, while I was doing Funny Girl, we opened in Boston. I took a couple lessons with Armando Gatala. And the first thing he asked me, I played something and he liked it. And he said, "Tell me a little bit about your background." And I told him I played my father has an Italian band, and I played all those Italian marches and things. He said, "That's good enough. I I know about them," he said.
I find it deliciously ironic that I was listening to another interview with you and you were describing something that we'll get to eventually today, but playing in Las Vegas and your day ran from 2 p.m. to 4 a.m. It almost sounds like the same schedule, like 50 years later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what Armando was talking about. It was the endurance thing. You played with those bands for a weekend. You better have some pretty strong chops.
I've never read specifically about this, but New Orleans was a very cosmopolitan city with all kinds of ethnic traditions. And I wonder if the street parades back then were partly an Italian occurrence.
I don't know. I never gave that any thought, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's possible.
It sounds like someone's PhD exploration to me.
Yeah. My father also had like the number one, and then back in those days they called it the dance bands. So he was like the most popular band in town. So I started playing with that also. But when I was 16, because I had to join the union, and I had to wait till I was 16.
I was going to
So
ask about that. Do you remember what it cost? This would have been Union. Which city?
Eastern Pennsylvania.
Okay, what did it cost to join the union? Can you recall?
About $5, I think.
Say that again.
About $5, if that.
And did you have to audition?
No, no.
Yeah, just like, what do you play? Trumpet. How many valves? Three. You're in.
I got it.
Yeah.
I always like to say it must be an easy instrument to play because you only got three things to push.
Along those lines, I read a sort of coincidental this phrase that we hear sometimes referring to a life in the arts, and the phrase is, if you find a job you like, you'll never work a day in your life, which sounds really nice, but it sort of indicates that it's an easy life. Would you describe what you do as easy?
No, no, it's very of all the instruments, probably the trumpet is by far the most physical. So you have to be in. You got to keep yourself in shape. You got to keep your body in shape because there's like so many little things just to produce one note. So many things have to synchronize right at the right time, and it's very difficult. But it becomes a passion, and then it's not work anymore. Then it's not work. It's so I think that's where that phrase came about. I never worked a day in my life. When it becomes a passion, like I'm still playing now, but you can't put it down. It's almost addicting, you know.
Did you ever have a period where the passion ebbed, or that the music that you started to play regularly did not appeal to you?
Well, like when I started with my father's band, we basically played the stock arrangements, that you could buy at a music store and stuff like that. And but it was a big band, three trumpets, a couple trombones, five saxophones. So it was nice with that. Then when the rock thing came in, that kind of alleviated the horns pretty much. There wasn't a lot of trumpet on those things, but everything we did, we even in high school, we started a jazz band, which was unheard of in those days. And even in college, we started a jazz band, which was really unheard of in those days. And so we kept playing. We had good charts. Then the guys were writing for it, and it was just fun. Playing is, like I say, when it becomes a passion, it's fun. So it's never really work. I don't think you forget about the physical part
Until it comes around and bites you, right?
Yeah, well, and it does come back and bite you too. Yeah, the trumpets. That I like what Dizzy Gillespie always said. You the trumpet. One day you play the trumpet and you win. The next day you play the trumpet wins, and then you die and the trumpet wins again. That was Dizzy's quote.
That's a good one. There's something about, you mentioned that you started a jazz band in high school and then in college. There's something about that initiative that makes the music that much more enjoyable, and your passion for it, because you're doing it on your own without any requirement, that you're here because you want to be.
Right, exactly.
Did you see um well, you're a young man and you're thinking, this is going to be my career. What are my opportunities here? What should I look to be doing?
Well, I had my eye set on I got the tail end of the big bands. Uh, I I played. Maybe you know this. When I was 13, I played a solo with Stan Kenton's band and Ray Anthony, different bands that came to town, featuring Easton's young trumpet player. And anyway, and I think maybe you know this too. And that band that I played with, that was Maynard and Buddy Childers, Connie Condoli, as well the heavyweights. Bob Cooper, Art Pepper, all those guys. And I saw those guys get on that band bus, and man, I was drooling. I said, I've got to get on that band bus someday. So I want to be the lead trumpet player with that band someday. And it came to pass.
I know what you're saying. I remember my parents taking me to see the Glenn Miller Orchestra. It was long after Glenn was gone, of course, but I stood in front of the sax section and said, I want to do that. I want to do that. Without knowing, of course, anything about what the life was like. But that didn't matter at that point.
No, it doesn't matter at all. But I say, like, watching those guys get on the band bus, oh man, I said, I got to do that someday. And I got to do it. And then that's the hardest part of the job is that band bus. With Stan Kenton, I was with the Mellophone band and playing lead trumpet with 4 mellophones, 5 trumpets, and five trombones is kind of a chore, but it was a fun chore. But he's the bus. We had such a large band with Stan Kenton that we couldn't check in every night. We would get maybe some weeks 3 or 4 nights of a hotel. The rest of the time, just riding the bus, getting to the next gig, 500 miles in between things, and run in, shave, shower, put the suit on, run back. Stan always kept the buses freezing cold, put on a winter coat, even though it was summertime, and go on to the next one. And so those were the kind of tough, kind of rough things to do. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Why did Stan keep the buses cold?
I don't know. He was always warm. He would get in the bus. We were, I was living in New York at the time, and I bought a heavy winter coat, and that's what we had. We rode in the bus with those things on, and they had the bus down to like 62 or 60. Really cold, sometimes colder, and sometimes he'd open the window. So
it's warmer outside.
Yeah, and the buses back then weren't exactly like the buses now either. They were pretty B flat.
Pretty B flat. Did you? I would imagine that bad habits, I'll just use that term, probably occurred because of that life.
It was a tough life, but I can speak for the bands I've been with, but I'll stick with Stan here for a minute. Stan didn't put up with any drug use or anything like that. He was very, very fussy about that. If he found somebody, he would send them off. So they didn't have a chance to get into that. But some of the other bands, they allow that.
Yeah. This is, of course, pre-cell phone, pre-Walkman. What did you fellas do to pass the time?
Well, we all had earphones. We could put on some kind of music that we wanted to hear. Speaking of that, no cells, no this, no communication at all. Takes a very understanding wife, because I couldn't be in touch with her a lot of the times. We'd be in areas where we were traveling, and we didn't have any access to a phone or time to make a phone call until we checked in someplace. So it took a good woman to put up with us.
And you have kids, right?
Yeah, 2.
Yeah. I bet they learned what the word gig meant early on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you miss out on some of their things that you wanted to get to, or had you settled in one place by that time?
Well, I didn't have the children. I was after I got out of the service, I moved to New York, and we didn't have any children at that point. And then when I moved to Vegas to join Harry James, we didn't have any children yet. And when we had our first child, my daughter, I did through about 6 months with that, and that's when I told Stan, Harry, I said, "This is too high. I don't think I can do this anymore." However, we used to work 50 weeks a year, and we mostly in Nevada, Reno, Tahoe, Vegas, and we go on the road 2 weeks in the spring, 2 weeks in the fall. But it got to the point, like with the child, packing all the stuff you have to pack and loading the car, and then it doesn't fit, and then it snowed in Reno. So that's what I told Harry. I said, I'm gonna have to leave. I would love to stay, but I need to stay. I need to be home.
And you're going to replace a gig with Harry James with what?
Vic Damone.
Vic Damone.
He was a great singer. Had great charts, really good charts. Jay Hill did a bunch of them, and that was a great job too. He worked Vegas a lot every year, and occasionally we'd go out for maybe like a weekend to Philadelphia, Columbus, or something, and go out. But I worked with him, and actually I replaced Buddy Childers there. Buddy Childers was the trumpet player for Vic, and I replaced him. I stayed for a couple years, and then my children were really small. I got asked to play at the ABC television in Los Angeles for TV shows, the Hollywood Palace. I don't know if you remember that.
Sure.
That was the last of the live shows, by the way. No fixes. No fixes. That, and then Pat Paulson, Half a Comedy Hour, it was called. And that was a small band. That was two trumpets, myself and Connie Condoli. It was an all-star band. It really was. Ray Brown was playing bass. Jack Sperling was playing drums. I forget who the saxophone player was. Did that. And the reason I moved to LA, Vic Damone, I had a lot of exposure with Vic Damone. They wrote a couple of charts where I had a chance to be featured like. And the conductor for Hollywood Palace happened to be in town and come to that show, and he heard me play. And he asked me if I'd like to come down and be the lead trumpet player at Hollywood Palace. And I talked to Vic, and I told Vic about it. And Vic says, "Well, how much are you making?" And I told him. He said, "I'll give you more." So he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I stayed another year. The following year, I got sounded again to go down and do it, and I did it. And the reason I really did that is I wanted to put a check on myself. Am I good enough to be a top studio player, with the heats on? Am I good enough to play as well as those guys? And I did that, and I went down and I found out that I was. So that satisfied my feeling about how my playing was, because I had never played with that caliber of player. We had good caliber players here, but they're top-notch guys down there, John Odino and all those guys.
Yeah, I was going to ask who you were sitting next to in those days.
Okay, well, the Hollywood Palace, they were pretty impressive, I tell you. Hollywood Palace was Manny Klein, Ray Triscari, Sweets Edison, and myself. That was one show. Then we did the Tom Jones show. That was Odino, Ray Triscari, Jimmy Zito, and myself. And on both of those shows, every time something would come in with some G's or stuff like that, Manny Klein would go, "Pass that to the kid." So I used to get all of that. They didn't want to play it, so they passed it to me. And then I say, like, the small band, just Connie Gondoli and myself.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that passing the part, because Bobby Shue had a similar story that he was complaining about the high parts, and Dalton Smith said, "Don't you know about this thing called pass it on?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things you have to learn. Well, you know the funny part is, Robert, with Stan Kenton, you couldn't pass the wrong. He would not allow to lead. You played lead trumpet, you played every single chart. He would not allow passing.
Even if you were having an off night.
Doesn't matter. You're not supposed to have off nights.
It's in the fine print in your contract.
No off nights. It's got that when you're playing that hard, like in the Kenton band, to sit on top of that big a band. For number one, it was a thrill to do that. Really a good high spot. But it's what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought there.
Yeah. Did you find it harder? Some of the arrangers that wrote for Kenton were pretty harmonically advanced. And if there was a spot in a chart, sometimes the last chord perhaps, where everybody in the section was playing fairly high, especially you, and it was a thick, almost like a tone cluster. Mm-hmm. Is it harder to find that note?
Yeah. What you need, you got to put 100% trust in yourself. If I have to play a high F and I got a guy pushing me with an E flat next to it, stuff like that, you just got to, you know where it is and just go for it. And that's the only way you can do it, because if you start listening to what's going on, so you have to have a lot of confidence. And I know where the high F lays on my horn. I know where this lays. So you just push the first valve down and let it fly.
Was there ever any figuring out, okay, the bass trombone player is ending on a low B flat, and I can hear that. And so I know where my F is in relation.
Yeah, it helps if you can have that relation. Yeah. But it is, when you first started, I went out with Stan Kenton. I was working Roseland Ballroom with a society band from Chicago, where I didn't even get out of the staff. And the next night I'm playing lead with Stan Kenton. It's kind of frightening.
You didn't even get into the staff, right? That's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. And in sort of doing some preparation for this, I was noticing the names Rubino, Triscari, Condoli, Porrello, Gazzo, and the vowels at the ends of these names. Like, what is it with the Italian brass player? Does it go back to the marching bands, do you think?
I don't know what it is. I always just make a joke and say we're the only ones dumb enough to want to play, to want to work that hard. No, I don't know. It is. There are a lot of that trumpet section with Tom Jones. That was total Italian trumpet section.
Wow. I've noticed a couple interesting little things along the way, and I'll mention two of them. I used to do a show with an Elvis act here locally, and we used to play that tune American Trilogy. Mm-hmm. And then I read somewhere that you were on that original recording. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that had a marvelous, about 3/4 of the way through, a very powerful brass thing.
Oh yeah, with it.
You were playing Glory, Glory, Hallelujah.
Yeah, I was playing lead on that. Yeah, that's that hard. You were playing full out. You were playing like triple forte. It was loud. But yeah, it was. The thing is, like, we were, I was younger then, and this sounds egotistical, but I don't mean it to be egotistical. But I don't go that route. But you couldn't tire me out in those days. I could play forever. When I was doing those 6 shows a day, I never thought about getting tired. And I might attribute that part to the Italian band, but I don't know.
Did you have something that you did with your diet or exercise or whatever to just keep yourself in shape?
Not really.
You're
Not really.
you've got the karma for it, I guess.
I guess, I was kind of like uh, blessed, I think, with it, as far as the range goes. You know, I think that was kind of a natural gift I got to be able to play that altissimo register. So it never was like difficult for me. So if I playing a bunch of charts, and some of them were screamers and some of them were not so bad. So it leveled out, and I could do it all. I could cover it. So
There are certain tunes that almost require an answer. Um, Musically, yesterday I got out a chart I had written for my sax ensemble, and it was a James Brown thing. And before we played it, I said, "All right, remember these are college age students." I said, "All right, everybody, give me the proper response." And I sang, "I feel good," and they all went diddle little little lit.
right.
So I'm going to try one out on you. If I sing, "Sweet Caroline,"
Dun, dun, dun. The three famous notes.
three famous notes.
Three famous notes. I've done so many things in my career. Now my students call me up after that. And he heard that, say, "Oh, Mr. Porrello, you're awesome for those three notes." Yeah.
Do you particularly remember that session?
Yeah, because it was everything's pieced together. We went in the brass section. We went in by ourselves with the headphones on. The rhythm section was already on. It wasn't done as a group. The rhythm section went on, then the horns go on, and then maybe the strings, if there are strings. But you never know who you're recording for. The voice is the last thing to go on. So we had to be told by the contractor that that we were on a million seller.
Wow.
Yeah,
Too bad you didn't get paid by the note.
yeah,
What that note is worth, because it's like a cultural icon now. You play that tune and everybody's singing Tom Porrello's trumpet part.
yeah, right. And then in Boston, if they played at every Boston baseball game, and I'm a Yankee fan, so I don't know if I.
Oh, that's priceless. Do you recall the first time that you did that? I remember reading an anecdote about Phoebe Snow, the singer, invited Teddy Wilson to come in and play on a tune of hers. And so he got there and they sat him at the piano and he said, "Where's the band?" And they gave him the headphones and he didn't know what they're in. "What are you talking about? Where's the band?" He had never done the overdubbing. And do you recall the first time you ever did it?
Well, the overdubbing thing.
Yes.
Yeah, well, in L.A. in the studios when I was there, that's the way almost everything was done that way. Very seldom did the entire band get together and play. I think Sinatra always kept a full band when he recorded. He didn't do it the other way. Vic Damone, he did it with a full band.
Did they put him in a
Some,
booth? Or they put him in a booth or something?
yeah, yeah, they have a little thing off to the side, and then then they go in the booth and they listen to it to see if they like what the way they sounded or if they like the way the band sounded, and if it was okay, good. We move on to the next chart. Back then there was we used to do a lot of charts in one recording session. Now they record something, it takes 3 months, and and the new thing they're doing is before you go in, they go on the computer, they send you your part so you can woodshed it before you get there.
No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So now sight reading was one of the main. If you're going to be a studio player, you better be a good sight reader because that's all you do is sight read. You don't rehearse anything, or you don't get the parts in advance. So you had to be a good sight reader. Now they send that stuff out. I did a couple Broadway shows, and before I ever went for the first rehearsal, I had the whole book on the computer.
Mhm. I think I know the answer to this question, but in a situation like, let's say, Victimone or Live, did they ever have to do another take that was fine except for Tom Porrello's part?
Not often. Not often. I've heard her a few times, but I can't remember any of them.
Good.
That's trying to be consistent, and accurate. Accurate. Uh, that helps. But then the other thing, which you may have, uh, when I would ask a student if they would, I said, what do I mean when I say you've got to be consistent? And they say, well, that means you don't have to clam a note. I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. Well, what are you talking about? It's okay. If you're going to be a lead trumpet player, you have to be very disciplined. You have to phrase, you have to lengthen the notes. Everything has to be exactly the same every time you play it because you got the rest of the band on your shoulders. You can't play it short one night and long the next. So that's what makes like Harry's band was so damn tight. They used to talk about Les Brown's band tight. Harry's band was unbelievably tight. You know, everything was. And with the Kenton band, when I joined the Kenton band, the previous lead player had things marked, and Stan gave me the prerogative to say, if you want to change anything, change it, but make sure everybody knows. Make sure the bones know, the rest of the trumpets. So that that works,
I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about arrangers and the music that gets put in front of you. And I would imagine that some arrangers and copyists are much more specific about what you're talking about. You know, these quarter notes have caps on them. And if they don't have anything, does that become more your decision about how to
Yeah,
deal with it? Yeah.
yeah, and then a lot of arrangers too that are not brass players. Some of the markings they put are not what they want. If you play exactly what they wrote, and they play it, and they go, no, no, no. Said, what? No, that note's got to be long. I said, well, it's got a cap on it. I said, oh, okay, well, fix it. And you fix it, and you play it that way every single time after that. So
Did you ever have any sort of philosophical disagreements with the drummers about how things are how things are supposed to go?
uh, no, I didn't have much choice. I had really good luck with drummers. On Harry James, I had Buddy Rich for 4 years. Then when he left, Louis Belson came on for a couple of months. Then Sonny Payne came. So I couldn't argue much with those three. No, it was just a natural feel. The first night I played, I flew out from New York and I went to Lake Tahoe and played. Sat down and played, and I worked. Was comfortable with Buddy right away, and he was comfortable with me right away. Luckily, because you don't want to be, you want to get along with him.
I have it from an inside source that he used to massage your shoulders or something afterwards to sort of help you get
Well,
through the night.
well, a couple times we did a TV show in Chicago. All the big bands did it. They went to WGN and they recorded it, and then they made videotapes for home use, and then they used to play it on TV in New York. And it had an arch, and the band was playing there. So we did that with Harry, and I think I've had a migraine headache probably 2 times in my life, and I had one that day.
Mm.
I literally thought I was going to die. When I stopped, when I was blowing, I was okay. As soon as the air stopped, the room would just go like this. And I said, well, Jesus. So the buddy saw that and I took a little break. He came over and he massaged my shoulders to help me out. And then Harry got in on it. You want me to tell you what Harry said?
Sure.
and a glass of vodka.
Yeah, he solved that issue long ago, right? He knew what to do. You're not of course, I can't really tell in Zoom, but I've seen you on the bandstands and videos. You seem to be smaller than most lead trumpet players who often have some heft to them.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have a question there, but uh, you're a physically strong guy, but you're small.
Yeah, well, I'm 5'5"
Mhm.
I think I shrunk a little bit. 5'5". In fact, uh, we have a book here called the Kenton Chronicles, and it's all guys that played with Stan, wrote pieces. And Jiggs Wiggum, Jiggs, the trombone player. Well, Jiggs was my roommate on the band, and he wrote that in the book. He said Tommy came on and played. What was it, Yesterday's, where the trumpet goes woo woo doo woo wee up to the high G. He said he's kind of a small guy. He said, but he got that out. Stan got a big smile on his face, and he got hired. No, I just, you know, if you breathe properly, it takes some of the stress off the chops. Otherwise, you don't bang them up and cut them up. If you follow Bobby Shoe's got a set thing that he teaches, and I have a little thing that I use too. Just getting the air to the diaphragm first, like yawning, and then sucking air up like you're like that, and then third, when you blow, grasp the air, and your stomach becomes hard. So you're pushing your stomach towards your back, and that's one of the reasons some trumpet players have back problems. But you're setting what by doing those three steps, you're setting up like a combustion chamber within your body, and that takes all the your sound projects better, your endurance is better, and everything's better. So I think I compensated that because I did that correctly, and by a gift. I never worked on that. It's just the way I did it when I first started to play.
That's good luck right there. The Kenton band came to my college where I was at SUNY Fredonia around 1970. So of course, after they left, we decided to play Kenton arrangements. And in talking it with you, I now can recall thinking about what those guys behind me were doing. I was in the saxophone section, and like we would play Here's That Rainy Day, and that brass buildup, the whole chart builds up to this ba-dee-da-da-da. And I remember thinking, wow, are they going to get it this time?
Yeah. Well, Kenton ballads are like no other ballad. They're about half the tempo of most bands' ballads. Everything. Da 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 dee. So man, I, we were in Denver once working, and we were playing the theme da 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 da. Well, the guy next to me, the third trumpet, he plays a high D, and he also hold it for 8 counts at that tempo. Then I come in, I pick up the D, and then go to a high G for 8 counts. And while I was playing, I looked over, and this guy was going. So I stopped and grabbed him by the back of his coat. Because the altitude's high there anyway, but you have to really pace your air in a Kenton ballad. You got it. Oh, it's very difficult because it's loud, and you got to pace. You got to know how much to give. Don't go past that, or you're not going to make it. So you have to work on that. Everybody's different, of course, but if you know what you have to do, you have to realize somewhere in your head that when you take your breath, you're going to have to go from here to here.
Yeah. You can't, even if the Kenton's like, come on, give me some more sound. You say, well, you can get sound or you can get a note. You can't get both.
He never had to go like that. We were out full out the whole time.
Yeah.
we, you know, I was playing the Bend's trumpet then. Jesus, that thing, man. I got when I got 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 rid of that horn and changed to something different. The the uh, the lead pipe and the mouthpiece holder. Well, there's supposed to be a little gap as far as the mouthpiece goes in, and then this is raised. It's the lead pipe. The guy said, who the hell played this trumpet, man? He said, it's gone. The whole thing is gone. It's just a straight pipe. So, I don't know. It's funny.
I can see the trumpet players who will watch this interview like chuckling right now with that sort of inside story. Did you ever have an opportunity to play either with Basie or with a band very similar to Basie? And because I'm wondering what the difference is between Kenton and, a swinging group like Basie.
Well, Basie is a swing band and everything. Basie, when it's short, ba, 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 that kind of thing. Ba, 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 ba. And we didn't have too many figures like that with the stuff we were playing with Stan. That album they did with the yellow cover with Al Porcino and all those guys, they had some charts like that. But it was short. When Jiggs and I used to mess around once in a while, and then when we'd play one of those tunes off of that album, we would play we would cut the notes short and stand them. This is not Woody's band. He'd say, don't play those short.
There's a funny anecdote about Stan, and I don't know if I would call it his aversion to swinging, but it wasn't his main goal. Is that a fair statement?
He loved Wagner.
Wagner.
He loved Wagner. And he liked that big blocks of sound. He was going after the sound. He loved that big sound of the thing. He wasn't against swinging, but he didn't have many charts that were ultra swinging. It was a whole different approach, kind of thing. Almost a little more orchestral, like.
So you became a first call trumpet player in Las Vegas, and I guess it was similar to the studios, like just be ready to do anything.
Yeah, we played for everybody, from country and western to swinging, to Sinatra, to Frank, Sammy, Dean, Tony Bennett, Barbara Streisand. We played for all those people. Each hotel had a 25-piece orchestra. That's long gone. So whoever appeared at that hotel, we played for them, and we would knock that out usually in a 3-hour rehearsal.
That was my question. Would the artist be there or not?
Most of the time. A few of them wouldn't. Like when we do the Motown, the temps and the tops and all that. No, they just have a conductor, and not even a rhythm section. The conductor had a cowbell, and he'd ding, 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 and we'd have to play all the charts with him hitting the cowbell.
Oh man.
Anyway, I've even done, believe it or not, all the way, almost anything from all the way back to, I did one thing with Metallica and one thing with Deep Purple. You want to talk about loud?
Yeah, Metallica. I mean, a couple guitars and amplifiers can cover up. It doesn't matter how many pieces you.
Well, we did the thing they did with the San Francisco Symphony. So this was a Grammy show or something, and we did something. I did that. I don't know. We played for everybody, no matter what. short time rehearsal, sight reading again. You got to be a quick, good sight reader. And all the guys, a lot of the top trumpet players came, while we're here. Bobby Shue was here. I was here. Uh, uh, Charlie Davis was here. Don Odino for a while. A lot of guys started here and then went off into the studios.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Chuck Lindley and I moved to LA in the same week.
Oh.
They used to come over to my house all the time. We shoot. I had a house I rented, had a pool table, shoot pool, and he stayed. And I was not crazy about. I like the caliber of players that I played with. I love the studio because playing in a showroom here is very difficult because they're usually padded with heavy drapery, so it really eats the sound up. So you got to push, and it's beyond the days when everybody had their own mic. There was no mics at all, except there may be a flute solo or something. We just played live.
What about with Lady Gaga now? I mean, that must be a high-tech show. Are they miking everything in the band?
Yeah.
And do you have in-ear monitors now?
Yeah, in-ear monitors, yeah. And most of the guys use them. I don't.
I don't blame you.
I don't. I like them. I could hear the drum fine. So for time, he was way over, but I could hear him fine. And I don't like, I can't get used to, even when you're recording, you put one on and take the other one off. So you can hear the guy next to you better. I'm not a fan of those, but a lot of guys do it and it works good for them. I wasn't about to get used to that. I just play without it and I'm fine. We do Gaga. I could hear, I don't need to hear myself either because when I'm playing, I can literally hear the sound bouncing off the back wall and coming back at me. So I don't need to hear myself through a earpiece.
Can you recall the first time or early on when the technology thing raised its head? Like, what's this synthesizer thing doing here?
Yeah, that changed things a lot. That knocked out a lot of people out of work.
Do you recall about when that was occurring, starting?
Oh, 70s maybe?
Say again?
70s maybe?
Yeah, that would have been the height of like a lot of those, at that time, high-tech keyboards came out. First, probably the string section went and.
Yeah, the string section. Some guys in the beginning, guys didn't know how to write for it either. So it really sounded not well at all. But later on, some of the guys really learned how to write for it, and they sounded pretty decent for like the string section. But in the beginning, it was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, you had a cheap sound and a cheap part.
Yeah, well, knocked out a whole string section.
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 strings.
Who were the arrangers? Did you have particular arrangers that you loved to see their name up in that right-hand corner of page 1?
Yeah. I mean, all common things. Harry had great charts. Basie with great charts. And Stan with, those are bands I played with, and I liked every one of them for a different reason. But Basie and Harry, at the tail end, we played a lot of Basie charts. They're not the same charts. Let me clarify that. We played a lot of stuff that was written by Basie's people, but written for Harry's band. We played a lot of that. So you say which band was kind of like Harry's band was getting close to Basie. In fact, we used to do a thing, and he wanted to play those. He didn't want to play "You Made Me Love You" and all that stuff anymore. So one night we were at the Flamingo and hotel, and they were calling for this and all that. And he goes, so on the break we talked a little bit. I said, Harry, they come here to hear that. So why don't you like put together 8 or 16 bars of each of those things that were big hits for you way back then? Once you get those out of the way, then you play anything you want. And he did. He got it. We put a nice medley together of his hits, and boom, now we could play the basic charts. We could play anything we wanted.
That's a good compromise. And were people dancing to his band?
No, no, we worked the lounges here in Las Vegas.
I see.
The lounges are all like 300, 400 seaters. But we would play at the Flamingo Hotel. We played on a high stage, and below us was the bar. And above us was like a dome, and it had cork, like hanging short ones to like keep the sound down so it wasn't too loud in the casino. So it was a hard place to play, you know. But every time, it never failed. I'd be with Harry's band, and Frank Sinatra Jr. would come in with somebody. I got 2 days, 3 days at the most. I'd get a call, ring, can you come in? So and so heard his chops. You know, so it was a hard place to play. But again, you gotta keep an open mind. You gotta pace yourself. You gotta know how much to give and how much to ease off.
I would think that ego has a bit to do with that. Like people, I can imagine, always want to impress. If you're a lead trumpet player and you always want to impress, that could lead to some of that physical injury.
Uh, Trumpet players, sometimes we're not the smartest people. We're used to hearing what we want to hear coming out of that bell, and if we don't hear it, we're silly enough to do extra to make yourself hear what you want to hear. I always was to teach my students that the way to do that for me, the way I do that, I can tell by my stomach how much I'm pumping, how much air I'm pumping. I can feel that. If it gets beyond that, because I don't hear myself, then I know I'm looking to get hurt. So I back off a little bit. I can tell by right here when I don't want to go any louder than that, even if I don't hear myself as well.
Was there a difference in playing in formerly smoky nightclubs than when they weren't later?
Well, with Stan and Woody, we did some nightclubs. We didn't do a lot of those with Stan. We did some, but more it was more like concert halls and theaters and stuff like that. So yeah, luckily I didn't have too much of a bad time with those things with all the smoke coming. Of course, I was a smoker back then too.
I was going to ask, and like you said, how important lungs are to this whole affair that you do, and so it's pretty amazing that you could be a smoker and do that.
Okay, well, number one, I didn't smoke until I went in the Navy. So I was about 23 or 24 when I first started to smoke. And I smoked for quite a while. And then I got a little chew. Every once in a while, when I go really to take a good, nice, deep one, I feel like a little zing. And I thought, I think trying to tell me something. So I quit smoking. And that's about 40 years ago now. And that went away, but it scared me when I felt that little ping, like a sharp. I got to stop this. so I did, and it paid off.
Glad you did that. A couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. If you got nostalgic, you felt nostalgic, and you wanted to hear a particular LP and a particular tune that you really did shine on, and you went and got the LPs out, what would that song be?
There'd be a couple of them. One of my favorites, again, is that Toothless Grin with Woody's band. But the story behind that, I was working at a hotel. I got called we played midnight till by the time I got home it was 2:30. And they said, can you get the first flight out tomorrow and fly down to San Francisco and play to finish this recording with us? And I said, I had to call the band leader and get the okay. And I went down and did it. So I had very little sleep. And we went down there and they passed the chart out. And the band, of course, had played it on the road, so they were well aware of it. And they didn't have to sight read it, but I had to sight read it. And I don't know, it was just swinging so good and everything. I just got into it and just let it fly, And there's two tunes. The tune before that is a ballad too. Come Rain or Come Shine. Those are the two. Come Rain or Come Shine and Toothless Grin. Those are the last two that I did. And there was another one I did, but it's on a different Woody album. I don't even know what that one is anymore. But it was fun with Woody Herman too.
Did you get some appreciative looks that day in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, the trombone player said, Jesus Christ, like, how long ago did Bill send you that chart? I said, Bill didn't send me the chart. I'm looking at it right now. But
would that have been Bill Holman?
No.
Oh.
No. Not on that particular album with Woody. That wouldn't have been him.
Okay, I just wondered about the arranger who did that.
Oh, it was you would know his name. He's actually one of Woody's musicians. Wrote the chart.
Oh, sax player, perhaps.
Yeah, one of them was a sax. That was Come Rain or Come Shine, but he lives here in town too. I should know his name. He's going to be bummed if I don't. If I don't remember his name right now. He's a very talented writer. He wrote Come Rain or Come Shine. And I think the drummer, one of the drummers wrote Come Rain or the other one, Toothless Grin. Boy, that's got a kicking out course on it.
Well, we'll look it up.
Yeah, I think you'll like it.
Yeah. Okay. Last question. And the Sunday New York Times Magazine, they always interview an author who's just put out some new book, and they ask them all the same question. If you could arrange a dinner party of authors, both living and not living, who would you invite? So my question to you is, if you could do such a thing with lead trumpet players to have a dinner party, who would be your short list of guests?
John Adino. Chuck Finley. Ray Triscari. Yeah, those are guys they're all going now, but they were heavy duty players. Today, some of the guys with the Tower of Power play really well. We have a band here in Vegas called Jerry Lopez. He's got a band, and there's Fat City Horns, and they are kicking some butt, man. It's an incredible band. And the lead trumpet player in that is Danny Falcone, who was a student of mine. And his father was the conductor for Sinatra for a lot of years. And Danny's playing lead on that. And he is just, he's playing incredibly well. So he'd definitely be invited too.
Do you think you guys would talk shop like, okay, what mouthpiece are you playing now?
Oh, that goes on all the time. My wife always breaks up if anybody comes over the house and I says, "You guys can talk about trumpets and mouthpieces for like 3 days without stopping," But I'll tell you something funny about me. I'm not much of a changer like a lot of them are. Some guys have over 100 mouthpieces. I played a Bach 10 3/4 CW when I was a kid in high school and all that. And when I moved to LA, I switched to a Bob Reeves mouthpiece. But he copied it, except for the back bore. He copied it off of that mouthpiece. So the Bob Reeves, I still play that one. So I've had like two mouthpieces since I was a kid. If it works, don't mess with it.
I'm with you
So
on that.
yeah. So and the horns, they make so many good ones now. I did most of my career on a bench trumpet, and then I switched over about 20 years ago to a box sterling silver, which the whole bell section is sterling silver. So for me, that horn like really projects. It's got a good fat sound, and I do most of my work on that now.
Nice.
But there's some other. I'm sure I left out a lot of great trumpet players that I
Sure.
invite, but off the top of my head,
Yeah.
quick, I can't.
Well, I would call Snooky Young and tell him about the party, and he would, so he could go too.
He definitely would be there. That's for sure. Yeah, definitely for sure. We have Tom DeLibro, who's a local trumpet player here. He's a great player too. He'd definitely be sure. Yeah, those are so many good ones.
Well,
Chase used to live here.
oh, Bill Chase. Yeah.
He used to live here. When I lived in New York, I was doing Funny Girl with Barbara Streisand in the Pit. And on my way home, I had to pass the club, with the jazz club there, and Bill would be playing with Woody, And we didn't talk a whole bunch. But then after I got off Stan Kenton's band, then all of a sudden we were good friends. Then he moved out here. And when I left Vic Damone, I got Bill to take my place when I went to LA to get to the studio. And we became good friends. Another Italian trumpet player, by the way, Bill Chase.
Huh?
Yeah, his name is not Chase.
Okay. Yeah, it took up too much space on the record.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great.
I want to say one more thing about
the
band leaders, how they differ.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Stan was like, you play with Stan Kenton, you're part of the family. That's the way he treats you, like your family. Then you ask him, who's the greatest lead trumpet player you ever had? Say, the one I have right now. And I'm sure when I left, he said the same thing to the next guy. We played once in Hollywood, and we were playing in a club, and behind me was like 4 ex-Kenton trumpet players looking over my shoulder. And Stan, after we got done, Stan gave me a big hug. That's the way he dealt with it. And Harry was always great. He liked me a lot, luckily. But he left a little space between him and a lot of the band, But not that he was arrogant with anybody, but he wasn't like, it wasn't exactly like family like Stan's was. And Woody, he was just to have a good time. And I played with Woody. They asked me to stay after the recording until they found somebody, so I stayed for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or something. And I said to Bill Byrne, who was the manager, who was also in the Naval Academy band with me, Bill Byrne. I said, Woody, when he gets a new lead trumpet player, he doesn't call that figure on top of I forget what tune it was even. Apple Honey.
Yeah.
The thing starts on a double C. I said, so I said, he doesn't never do that. He said, never. He called it the fourth tune. Luckily, I nailed it for him. Oh boy.
Well, you had some confidence in your own abilities, that's for sure.
Yeah, and my father always made sure that I didn't let ego get in my way. My father was done. No, we don't do any ego crap. You play good. That's good. That's all you need to do. You don't need to tell people how good you play. If you play good, they'll hear it. So he always kept me, don't get that ego trip going. So I never did.
That's a very quotable, Tom. So that's the best way I can think to end this session. And I very much appreciate your time, and you've been a joy to talk to.
Yeah, well, likewise. It's good to see what you look like. And I guess you're glad to see what I look like, too. I was really concerned that this whole thing was going to happen because, I do everything on the computer. I do my banking and all that stuff. But I did one Zoom thing for that trumpet players over 50. Oh, what a disaster. Can you hear me? No, I can't hear you. Wait, fix that. Luckily I had Danny Falcone here next to me. To hit this button, do that. This was like a piece of cake. This was nice.
Well, good.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
I'll get to meet you in person sometime.
I hope so. I think I should come out to Las Vegas.
Yeah, well, we don't have a hell of a lot going on for horn players now, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of work for trios and a saxophone player right
Okay.
now. There are very few things using a horn. I sub it right now at Rat Pack shows about Sammy, Frank, and Dean, and that's got like two trumpets, a trombone, and a sax, four horns, and that gets a good little blow for you. You know, gets me out of the practice room. I get tired of listening to myself. I like the guy to play with a band once in a while. It's like a sport. You can't just practice. You got to play the game. You know.
Well said. All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, my pleasure.